They don't leave when it first hurts, they leave when something inside them finally goes silent, and you never hear that silence coming. Because while you think everything is fine, something deep in them is already collapsing. But here's the truth. Empaths don't break loudly, they detach quietly. They stay long after the respect is gone. They stay long after the connection feels one-sided. They stay even when their intuition is screaming that something isn't right. And that's where the illusion begins. You start believing they'll always be there. You confuse their patience for weakness. You mistake their understanding for tolerance. And without realizing it, you begin to cross lines you don't even see. Lines they never announced. Lines they never defended out loud. Because most people don't see this, empaths don't react to protect themselves, they absorb to understand. They analyze your tone, your silence, your inconsistencies. They replay your words, searching for meaning beneath what was said. And while you move on casually, they are slowly rewriting the story of who you are. But here's where it gets dangerous. They rarely confront you when it matters most. Not because they're okay, but because a part of them is still hoping you'll become aware on your own, that you'll notice, that you'll stop, that you'll choose them without being asked. And when you don't, something shifts, not dramatically, not visibly, but permanently, because the moment an empath realizes they have to explain basic respect, something inside them disconnects, and you won't notice it right away. They'll still smile, still reply, still show up, but the emotional investment is already withdrawing. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think the breaking point is an argument, a betrayal, a moment of conflict. But no, the real breaking point is much quieter. It's the moment they feel unseen, unfelt, unvalued, and something inside them whispers, this is not where you belong. But here's the contradiction: they won't leave immediately, because their identity is tied to staying, to fixing, to understanding what others refuse to understand. They carry emotional responsibility that was never theirs. And deep down, they believe love should endure discomfort, even when that discomfort is slowly destroying them. And this is where it becomes psychological. Because every time you dismiss them, they question themselves. Every time you ignore their emotional cues, they go deeper into self-analysis. Am I too sensitive? Am I overthinking? Am I asking for too much? And without realizing it, they begin to shrink. They silence their needs to maintain the connection. They suppress their instincts to avoid conflict. They betray themselves to keep you. But here's the truth no one tells you. Every act of self-betrayal leaves a mark, and those marks don't disappear. They accumulate, quietly, patiently, until one day the weight becomes unbearable. And that's when the shift happens, not emotional, not explosive, but absolute. Because once an empath reaches that internal threshold, there is no discussion, no warning, no second chance. They don't fight, they don't beg, they don't explain, they simply detach. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because by the time they leave, they've already processed the loss. They've already grieved you while still being with you. They've already accepted what you couldn't give. And they've already let go before you even realized there was something to lose. And when they finally walk away, it feels sudden to you. But to them, it was inevitable, because you didn't lose them in one moment. You lost them in 1,000 small ones you thought didn't matter. The ignored messages, the half-hearted responses, the subtle disrespect disguised as jokes. The emotional absence when they needed presence the most. But here's the truth. Empaths don't leave because they stop loving you. They leave because they finally start choosing themselves. And that shift is irreversible, because once they see the pattern, they can't unsee it. Once they feel the imbalance, they can't ignore it. Once they recognize their own worth, they can't negotiate it. And this is where your mind starts to panic. Because suddenly, they're not reacting the same way. They're not chasing, not explaining, not trying to fix what's broken. And it confuses you, because the version of them you knew would have stayed, would have fought. Would you like to do something? Have tried harder. But this version is different. This version is silent. And that silence is not weakness. It's closure. But here's where it gets deeper, because their silence forces you to face something uncomfortable. Your own behavior, your own patterns, your own emotional negligence. And most people can't handle that. So they create narratives. They changed. They became cold. They gave up too easily. But the reality is much harsher. They didn't change, they stopped tolerating what they once normalized. And that feels like loss, because it is. You didn't just lose a person. You lost someone who saw you beyond what you showed the world. Someone who understood you even when you didn't understand yourself. Someone who gave you emotional depth without demanding the same in return. And you took that for granted, because it was always there, until it wasn't. And this is where the ego starts to struggle, because you want to believe they'll come back, that they just need time, that things can go back to how they were. But here's the truth. Once an empath disconnects at that level, there is no going back, because they didn't just leave you. They left the version of themselves that tolerated you. And that version no longer exists. And this is where it becomes final. Because even if they return physically, emotionally they are already gone. The depth is gone. The vulnerability is gone. The unconditional presence is gone. And what remains is distance, controlled, intentional, permanent. Because they've learned something most people never do. That love without respect is self-destruction. That empathy without boundaries is self-abandonment. And that staying in the wrong place slowly erases who you are. So when they leave, they're not running away. They're reclaiming themselves. And that's why it feels so final. Because it is. Because once an empath chooses themselves over the connection, there is nothing left to negotiate, nothing left to explain, nothing left to fix. Only distance, only silence, only truth. And by the time you understand what happened, they're already gone forever.